This episode of the Pain Education Corner is sponsored by the Comella Foundation. The Comella Foundation is committed to relieving pain naturally using osteopathic healing principles. Here at the Comella Foundation, we envision a world where people achieve their maximum potential by being empowered with knowledge and skills to heal themselves and others. This information is to be used for educational purposes only and not to be construed as medical advice. If you have any questions or concerns, please consult a licensed healthcare professional. Bill, the knee pain guru, and welcome to the Pain Education Podcast brought to you by the Comella Foundation. Today we have a special guest that is going to share her own story on how she came from being in pain and dealing with chronic pain in her life to be able to share her gifts with us today. So I would like to welcome Stanter Kandola. Did I get that?
Almost. Stanter Kandola.
Kandola.
Yeah.
Okay, Stanter. I apologize. My bad. Okay. Stanter, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. And would you share like your story? Like what happened in your life with pain?
Okay, so I was 15 years old and I woke up one day and I had this intense pain in my ankle. I thought I'd sprained it, but later on in the day it cleared up. But the same thing happened again the next day. And I thought that was a bit strange. So I went to the doctors and basically came back, had some blood tests done, and the diagnosis came back as having rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
at 15. And it was a bit of a shock because my only experience of arthritis was older people, So I'm 15. It's the idea of this kind of older people disease. Didn't quite know. I mean, this was the 80s, so there's no internet to research what the condition was. But just kind of having a sense of this, I have this condition. Clearly, it's something to do with pain and inflammation. But I really didn't know much more than that at that point. Um, and I was told that I should stop doing sports, not do any kind of sports at school, which isn't something you really want to tell people with arthritis, because I think certain
Especially a
amount of,
15-year-old.
especially that
Yeah.
15-year-old, I think exercise is actually a really important part of the journey. So I stopped doing all of those kinds of things, and it was okay for a couple of years. It kind of would impact a little bit here and there, but not so much that it kind of took over my life. And that really happened when I was 17. 17, it became debilitating. It became extreme. My whole body was flared up. I mean, there wasn't a cell in my body that wasn't in pain.
Mhm.
And I was just in this excruciating pain. I was having flare ups, constant flare ups. And for those people that have rheumatoid arthritis will know this, where you're so stiff, you can't move, you're swollen, the pain is it's so hard to explain that level of extreme pain where you basically just want to scream inside, but you
Mhm.
can't, and just very, very much relying on the doctors, guidance, because I, didn't know where else to go. And I come from an immigrant family, my parents are Indians, I'm Indian. And so this idea of anything alternative wasn't something that was on our radar. It was just, well, you go to the doctor, you know what they say is correct, and you follow what they do. And that's what I really did for those kind of good few years following kind of 17 years of age. But nothing was helping. Absolutely nothing was helping. My body was getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah.
And so it started in your ankle.
Yeah.
And did it begin to radiate out, or did it just affect your joints, or can you kind of
Yeah, I mean,
share your
yeah, at the
experience?
beginning, as I said, it was very much like as if I'd sprained my ankle. That was the
Hmm.
first kind of manifestation of that kind of pain, some inflammation, pain that kind of subsided during the day, and then it was gone. But as I said, when I got to about 17, it just became this attack in my body, like, it was, I didn't recognize my body. I hated my body. I hated what I was becoming because I
Mhm.
was just a slave to this condition that I had no control over. And really, I'm somebody who likes to kind of, well, retrospectively looking back on those years, can see what else was going on in my life that also was contributing to the pain and the RA within my body. It wasn't just, oh, there's your body, that's happening outside of any other influence. I was in a really difficult relationship with my parents, coming into my teens, 17, 18, wanting to have independence, do things for myself. And really, that there wasn't, my parents were, their main goal was that we were in England, we were living in England now. They wanted me, my brother, my sister to have a really good education, so that we would do better than what they did. But at the same time, they very much wanted for us to culturally live the Indian Sikh Punjabi values at home, which really meant that the girls of the family weren't really allowed to have any kind of independence and freedom.
Mm.
And so, and my name, oddly enough, means independence, freedom,
Oh, wow.
liberation, right? So what am I going to do? Like that is who I am, and that's what I've fought for all my life. It's been this sense of within the family, this idea of actually being female. I am not lesser than,
Hmm.
than my brother or my uncles or whoever, but I am who I am, and I really wanted to own all of that. So I was in this struggle at home with my family, leaving home at 18, even though my body was just, in this extreme state. But there was just something in me that just felt I would just die at home if I stayed, under
Hmm.
all of that oppression. So there's a lot going on in my kind of personal life, which I think also contributed to the RA being in the extreme state that it was in those early years. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow. And that's intense. Those years without all of that outside pressure are intense just in
Yeah.
and of itself. And then you add the physical pain you're experiencing from this rheumatoid arthritis and the social structure that
Yeah.
you were born into it can be, wow, it's a whole
Yeah.
lot.
It's a whole lot. And then, as you said, at that age, you're coming into your adulthood in a way, your body's changing anyway, just
Mhm.
hormonally everything is changing. And then is this sense of this body's just becoming crippled,
Mhm.
to the point when I was between like 18 and 20, 22, no, 18 and yeah, 18 and 20, I would say. Um, I was just self-medicating so much so because um, well, there was a shift that happened. So in those days in England, they had specialist hospitals for arthritis, for rheumatoid arthritis. So with this situation of me now having left home and not seeing my parents and my family, kind of being a little bit disowned by everybody, I would end up in these hospitals because again the flare-ups would be so extreme. And I remember there was a couple of things that happened in those hospitals that really kind of altered the direction I was in. One of them was that before that, as I said, I was very much into, well, the medical professionals, they know what they're doing, I'll be cured. In my mind, of course, this can't possibly go on for the rest of my life. There has to be an end point, there has to be a cure. So I really trusted that the medical profession, that there was a cure within that. So when I'd end up in these hospitals, often in a huge flare up, there was two instances that happened there. One was there was a woman in the bed next to me who, at that point, she was in her mid 40s at that point, and her spine was crumbling, and it was because of the steroids that she'd been on, the high doses of steroids and other medications that they were giving for RA in those days. And suddenly she was moving towards being crippled by this disease more so than just the actual RA, symptoms. And I just thought, you know what, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to do that. I am going to perhaps not take some of the medications that they're going to recommend, especially if I know that in the future, in my 40s, that I could be really damaged by that, by the side effects. So that was one of the decisions that I made. And the other one was that in one of my hospital stays, um, I remember this moment where I'm in the bed and I have like about 4 or 5 doctors around the bed. They're all men, older men. And as I said, when you're in a flare up, I don't know whether you've ever had a flare up that kind of your whole body is in a flare up. You can literally can barely be touched, because the
Oh,
pain is so extreme, it's so raw. And they're just prodding and pulling, and I'm just like
jeez.
sweating from the level of pain. I mean, no care for,
Sure.
consideration of me. I was just this slab of meat. And I remember one of them saying, just fairly nonchalantly, just, oh, well, you'll end up in a wheelchair. And again, this
Wow.
kind of shocking moment of like, well, I could see my body was in a bad state. So it wasn't as if, I wasn't aware of that. But this idea of prophecy, of my future, it just, I think it just blew my mind to the point where I was like, I'm never coming back. I'm not going to see specialists. I'm not going to go to the specialist in any way. I'm just going to manage this by myself because the medications they were offering me, I knew that they would potentially have some really long-term damages for me.
Hmm.
And having kind of, all this didn't quite happen in the timeline, but these are some of the bigger memories of those years. But there was also another point where I kind of realized that I could either end up being really bitter
Hmm.
and the victim, and like it's all happening to me. And I thought, God, that's me living in my own head. It's not like I'm going to be living like that because I felt so, life just felt so unfair, and I felt like I was losing out on this potential future that could have had because of this condition, because of this body, and not liking this body, hating the situation I was in. And so I thought either it's really bitter or I'm going to have to look for something else because there might be. So far, I've just focused on the medical model as that possibly saving my life and giving me a life again. That clearly isn't working. They've tried all kinds of things. The things they want to try, I don't want to try because of the long term effects. So that was quite a pivotal moment as well to say, all right, I'm going to have to look for other things and then see if there is anything else out there that could potentially really help me with my body, with having this condition and trying to make sense of it for myself.
And this is taking place, would you say, early 20s, up into
Yeah,
your early
late, kind
20s?
of, it was kind of 18, 19 was when I began to do this kind of, this thinking began to open up a little bit about, is there the possibilities? What is there, it's more of, is there a choice? Do I have a choice in any of this? Because it didn't feel like that. It felt like it was
Right.
just done to me.
Hmm.
So there was this kind of beginning, this opening of perhaps there's another way. Perhaps there's something else. So how do I find out? What do I do about that? And I'll be really honest with you that it let before the situation at home with my life began to worsen in some ways that at one point I did decide to take my life. And because I just, it was mainly because it wasn't a cry for help because I'm quite strong in that way. I would have, if it was a cry for help, I would have asked for help. But it was actually this one moment when I'm 20, 20, I think it was, that I just thought, you know what, this life, this body, this situation that I'm in, because I really wanted to just, put my fingers up and leave everybody and just walk away into the sunset. But I physically couldn't. I needed to be at home. I needed help.
Hmm.
So that I'm in this relationship with my parents where I actually need help, but it's really toxic, and yet I can't leave.
Yeah, it's
On my
not
own.
the help that you need.
it wasn't the help that I needed,
Yeah.
right? It was the help that they were doing their best. You know, my parents were struggling with all kinds of stuff with trying to set up businesses and then their relationship, but it wasn't what I needed. And so there just came a point because at this point now I'm self-medicating. So I'm taking
Mhm.
about 30, 40 to 50 really high dose painkillers every day because I'm in a flare up most of the time. I'm taking anti-inflammatory 10 or so anti-inflammatories a day. I'm taking 3, 4, 5 sleeping tablets a night because my body is a dead weight, you know.
Right.
So if I need to, because the pain starts even after a couple of minutes of lying on any side, so I need to wake up to physically move the dead weight of my body to another position. So literally just having a couple of minutes, you know, of shut eye before I have to kind of move myself again. So this, you know, extreme psychological state, sleep deprived, you know, emotional situation not great. So I make this decision that actually I'm done. I would
Mhm.
rather risk finding out what's on the other side,
Mhm.
you know, than actually stay in this life right now.
Sure.
And you know, I was reading a lot around kind of Aldous Huxley, you know, we were really into the doors, you know, um, idea of consciousness being more than just the third dimensional reality. So I always kind of believed there was more, you know, there was
Mhm.
always something other, that the experience of consciousness doesn't just end with the death of the body, right? So because of that, then I was able to kind of make that decision to take my life. But what actually happened was that so I took all the medication that I had, and I had loads of it, you know, because you
Oh,
know, 'cause of
wow.
my condition, right? So I just took it all, took it all, took it all, left a note for my parents, and I woke up 2 days later, I think, in hospital, and and in those days, if you, and I don't know how it is these days, I hope it's a lot better in hospitals, but in those days, if you were seen to someone who was trying to take their life, the nurses and the doctors really didn't like, because they're there to save lives, and how dare you try and take your life. So there was
Mhm.
that attitude from the medical staff there. There was my mum and dad at the end of my bed, mum saying, how could you do this to us? And again, another kind of shock of like, I wasn't
Yeah.
doing it to
Like,
you, you know, again, it's not about you, you know. And but the reason I didn't die wasn't because I didn't take enough, is because I'd been self-medicating and my system was so used to such high levels of all the medications that it just actually just knocked me out. They didn't
oh
even
my
need to pump my
gosh.
stomach.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so that was kind of the lowest point, you know, in terms of where I got to. And and at that point, even coming home, it was almost as if it hadn't happened. We didn't talk about it. It wasn't discussed. So it was this weird state of this huge thing happening, and yet we were back in the same loop of, you know, being at home,
Mhm.
and living at home. And you know, at this point, my brother and sister, who are younger, were at university. They're in London. They're having their life, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm just kind of left behind,
Mhm.
you know, with this condition, with nowhere to go. Like my life is pointless. You know, it really felt like that. And my brother sent me 2 books at this point, and they were really important at that point as well. And one was Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach.
Ah,
You know that
yes.
book?
Yeah, I've read that one.
Yeah.
Great
So
book.
fantastic book, you know, just a little short book, but brilliant. And
Mhm.
the other one was Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life.
Good one
And
too.
a good one. Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of like, you know what? Okay, I'm here. Let's just begin the work. Let's just see what this is. And that was really the point that time really began to look at what alternative things are there out there for me to begin to try. And so I went start doing yoga classes, started meditating, finding a class to join a meditation class. I kind of was observing my mind, you know, and just noticing, well, is there a relationship with what we think and what happens in the body? You know, is there a relationship with that? So I began to observe my mind. I was quite shocked actually that it was so negative, you know, it was so dark. I was like, wow, okay.
What did Louise Hay say about rheumatoid arthritis? I don't know offhand.
Gosh, I haven't read it in such a long time. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I think what she talks about is the body attack. Why are we attacking ourselves? So there's
Oh,
something about the condition because it is that's what it's doing. The body is attacking itself.
and the negative thoughts in the mind.
And the negative
That,
thought
yeah,
mindset, I'm
sure.
attacking
Yeah,
myself from every which
sure.
angle you can possibly think about, right? And the other thing, and I'm sure you probably have come across this, is that people who have long-term health conditions, chronic pain, or disabilities of some kind, where their lives suddenly dramatically changed, perhaps than what they wished it to be, are
Mhm.
often really hard on themselves. Yeah, they're really negative, they're really judgmental on themselves, and just hypercritical, and that does a lot of damage. It does a lot of damage. And so I thought, okay, there's a lot of negativity. I'm really, if this is what I'm putting out, like, it's not surprised that what I'm inviting in is kind of mirroring,
Sure,
that. So
sure.
that was kind of the beginning parts of looking at the my condition in a more holistic way. So
Mm.
rather than it just being, this is the medical model, and I'm going to trust it and everything's going to be fine, and it's all going to work out, to now almost like saying, nope, I'm not going to deal with the medical model apart from the painkillers and the anti-inflammatories, and the basic I could kind of get away with because I was still in a lot of pain in those years. Um and um and yeah, that journey's been really interesting because that led me to try all kinds of weird and wonderful. And that's the other thing, when you begin this journey, I'm sure you've tried all kinds of things, right? You're just like, okay, I'm open. I'm open. Anything is possible.
Yeah.
And so, I started getting onto lots of kind of the basic stuff is the doing supplements, to see what might supplement my body. So doing a lot of that kind of work. And then my sister left the UK to start this new school in Santa Fe in New Mexico. And really, that was an alternative school. And she was like a big part of my support and helping me to kind of get another layered understanding of my condition and the relationship between the pain body, the emotional body, the mental body, the psychic body, the spiritual bodies. So how do we integrate all of those aspects of ourselves? How do we heal all of those aspects of ourselves? And so there was a lot of work around multi-incarnational sessions. There was a lot of work around looking at the ideas of all of these aspects, the emotional, the physical, the mental, and seeing, well, where how have some of the stories and the experiences that I've had, especially in childhood, still impacting me now, in those years. What is it? Where am I being held back? Where am I have certain judgments about myself that have come from my early years? So I began to do a lot of that kind of deeper work, alongside her being in the States and what she was learning and what she was experiencing. So that was again another really important kind of perspective on what was happening for me in those years. Um, and the other thing that I one of the things that I began to see with people in those early years was how many people lead with their condition.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's not Stanter and hi, I'm Stanter. No, hi, I'm arthritis, and da 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 da. So there's that kind of victim nature where they're like, poor me, it's so bad. Well, it is bad. There's no doubt about it. It's not
Certainly.
denying that. But however, I am not my disease. I am not my
Yeah.
condition, right? So I was quite adamant about that. That I was never going to be the victim to my circumstances, the victim to this condition, but instead I was going to kind of find some way of healing, some way of still looking for the cure. So don't get me wrong, the big goal is the cure, right? The big goal is still that I still have aspects of myself that I don't, didn't like. I was still still discovering. Yes, you will know this takes a long time. This journey takes, quite a long time to kind of get to that place. And along the way, I've lived in India, I've lived in America, I've never allowed the condition to stop me from having a life, even though I've had to really struggle to
Hmm.
go and have these journeys and really lived with this sense of having this intense pain that's my normal. Yeah. That I'm not going to be set back by that condition in any shape or form. Um, and and I remember when I was living in the States in particular, and I'm surrounded by people who are very much kind of, some of them quite new agey, some of them are like, you know, there's so many people kind of with stories of being healed and cured, and you're desperately looking for that. Oh yeah, this person's brilliant. Their work really can heal you, and I would try
Hmm.
out all these things, and I wasn't being healed, I wasn't being cured. And at this point, my knees, I'd lived in Australia and I'd come back. I'd gone to university, I'd finally, because the other thing I was doing a lot of was facing my fears.
Hmm.
And because it was kind of seeing, well, how true were these fears? Were they real? Were they rational? Were they just there because of conditioning, because of the way I was brought up? And one of them was around um, how smart I thought, or how bright I thought I was, or intellectual that I thought I wasn't. And
Hmm.
thought, right, I'm going to go to university. Yeah, I'm gonna go, and I'm going to go to the university that I really want to go to. And I did. I made it. I went to
Cool.
university in London, and then at that point was when I needed to engage with the medical profession again, because what happened was when I got to university in my first term, the flare-ups were just extreme, to the point I couldn't even really make it to class, I just couldn't do the work. And my doctor then said in London, it's like, look, either you go see a specialist and figure this out, or you're not going to make it at university. You look at you, look how tough it is right now. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll go. And that's where I met Professor Edwards. And he was a rheumatology specialist, just a gentle being, a really lovely human being. And he never ever pushed me for any treatments. We would have my tests. He said, I think the smallest thing you can probably get away with taking is really small doses of steroids, and that'll just keep the inflammation down so you can, get through university, and then we can decide on other things. And I did. I took his advice, and I managed to, I was still in a lot of pain, but the inflammation, I wasn't having flare-ups quite the same way, so I was able to get through my university years. But when I finished university and I was going to go to Australia for a year, I just decided that actually that was one point where I was going to fully engage with my health again, because university years, it was like drinking, doing this, doing that, and didn't really stay on track with what I wanted to stay on track with.
Right.
So soon as I left university and I was, getting on the flight to Australia, it's like, right, that's it. No more drinking, no wheat, no sugar, just really everything, just cut everything out, even stopped taking the steroids, which was a bit silly, really, because I should have stopped in small amounts. And I'm a little bit like, right, I'm going to go all out, and, instead of small doses. But what that showed me was how much the steroids had been masking what was really going on inside of the body.
Hmm.
And what was really happening was my knees were just shot, they were damaged really severely. The area was still extreme, and I tried different treatments, when I was in Australia. And again, some things were kind of a little bit helpful, but not enough. So that when I came back to England and, coming to see my professor, and he's like, well, I think you need to have knee replacements, that look at these x-rays, it's just basically bone on bone, it was that extreme. And I just thought, well, okay, how often do knee replacements have to happen? They're like about every 15 years. So I'm in my 30s. So I'm thinking, well, how many am I going to be able to sustain in my body? Like, really,
They're
So maybe,
only rated for 15 to 20 years,
yeah, exactly,
and
right?
then they wear out, they got to replace them
They're
again.
going to replace me. So I'm thinking if I have them done now, 30, 40, 45, and then that, where at one point am I going to be able to, they're not going to be able to keep doing it.
Right.
So again went on a search, and I was went to America, went on a search to get, different kinds of cartilage build-up treatments, all this other kind of stuff. And then nothing was working. I mean, that knee pain when it's just brutal bone on
Yep.
bone, I'm
Yep.
sure you know it, right? So it's both of these knees. So then I made a decision to have knee replacement. So I came back to England during my stay in America, had
Mhm.
both the knees done. And, that was a huge transition again, like, oh my God, to be able to walk again. But then also what was happening at that point was that he was trialing out a new treatment. And he said to me, I think this is something you'd be okay with, compared to all the other stuff. I understand why you didn't want to do it. And this treatment, as far he was trialing it, so he didn't think there'd be any side effects, but he says, trust me. I said, okay, well. So I went on this treatment with him on this trial, and it did. It had a huge impact on my body. And the inflammation went down, my knees were working now, and so suddenly I began to have this sense of like, okay, that there's something about my life that feels like I could maybe now look outside of just maintaining this body and living with this condition. And I guess in terms of work and stuff, I had done projects, so I'd done some teaching in America, I'd done some filming with my brother occasionally when I was in England. So I'd been doing little bits, but it certainly wasn't a career. I'd kind of had to, I guess on some level, I made a decision to value and put my health front and first, because I was too aware of all the side effects that people can go through when they have extreme conditions and the medication that's needed to suppress the
Mhm.
condition. And I wasn't willing to really do that. And I'm lucky enough that, with my parents' support, I was able to live a basic life without, without having to find a job. Um, and when I was in America, one of the other pivotal moments was when I was, as I said, I was always this sense of wanting a cure. And there was this moment, I don't know whether you've been to Santa Fe or New Mexico, but basically it was driving in the car, and you come over to this top of this hill, and it's just like this vista that opens up, that you can
Mhm.
just see forever into the horizon, and just mountains in the backdrop. And I was and suddenly it just occurred to me that, what I'm actually looking for is a sense of healing, well-being. It wasn't attached to the cure, because if I hadn't done all this work on my emotions, on my what I was eating, the exercising, all of those different aspects of myself, and I was still the same person and I'd got cured, actually I don't know what kind of a person I would have been. I think I would have been quite miserable still, and still
Right.
not great. Do you know what I mean? Like, because the
Yep.
whole of me would have still been that same person, bitter, feeling like
Yeah.
a victim.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Pain Education Corner. If you have a special talent or skill to relieve pain and you'd like to become a guest on our show, visit us at thecomellafoundation.org/interview. Help us spread the word on eliminating pain and suffering in the world. That's thecomellafoundation.org/interview. I think you're making a really great distinction there between the cure and the feeling of well-being,
Hmm.
because you could be, and I've had this experience. I could be in a lot of pain, but I could feel like everything's all right.
Yes.
Like I have
Yes.
this sense of well-being, and I think that's a huge distinction to uh, that would be easy to gloss over, but it's huge there.
It,
That sense of
it's
well-being.
it's massive, for someone with conditions, particularly where there isn't a sense of cure. Because if you're constantly longing for that,
Mhm.
right? That longing, that wanting, that yearning causes pain in
Mhm.
itself, right? Emotional pain, physical pain, that kind of sense. You don't see anything else other than
Yeah.
this one thing that you're wanting.
You're
But when
not
that,
enough. You don't have
yeah,
enough. Like
you don't
it's
have
you'll
enough,
never
you're not
get
enough,
there.
never gonna get that. Look at you, what's the point?
Mhm.
And that moment when it's like, when I looked internally and thought, oh my God, I don't have that dark thoughts that I used to have. It's not all how horrible, how terrible I am. It wasn't still brilliant, but it was a lot better. There seems to be like uh, room and space inside of me that was
Mhm.
never there, a strength inside of me that had never been there all those years ago. And I'd not even noticed it. Hadn't even noticed the value of that until that moment.
Mhm.
So that again was like, wow, actually, I am a lot different than I was 10 years ago and where I was internally in my emotional, physical, mental states. And I was really grateful to have that opportunity and that moment to recognize it. And as you said, recognize the power of what that meant. So it shifted. So my perspective shifted from this wanting this cure. Now, don't
Mhm.
get me wrong, if there is a cure that's somewhere happening, of course, I'd happily go for it. But
Sure.
that's not
Sure.
the only thing that's important to me right now. You
Right.
know, it's about how can I have a life that's full of um, meaning, that has joy in it, that has a sense of achievement. Can I have all of that with this condition? And yes, I can, because I am. I am.
Cool.
If I could speak to my 15, 20-year-old self and tell them what I'm doing now, she would not believe it. She would not ever think that that was possible because
Right.
I was so shy. I was so intimidated by people. Even being, in a group or watching a lecture and asking a question, I couldn't even ask a question because I'd get tongue-tied and get it all wrong and then berate myself for why did I do that and I'm so stupid and all of that kind of stuff would
The
happen.
negative
The
self-talk. Yep.
negative stuff. Yeah, exactly. But what I realized in those early years to challenge that, to challenge my negative thinking, to look at where I thought, where my fears were, and could I challenge that and could they be turned in a different way? Could I have another perspective on that?
Stancher, there's one point that I want to bring back and pause to talk about just a minute. And that was about the 15-year-old self or the teenage version of you would not be able to recognize the
No.
person that's being interviewed today. And I think that's a really important distinction for anybody that's suffering in pain,
Yeah.
that in order to feel different about your pain, about your experience, you have to become a different person.
Yes.
And it isn't clear. We don't know how we're going to get here from there or there from here.
Mhm.
It We need to just start taking, like you did, one step after another, moving in that direction of making conscious choices to want to feel better, to want to do better for yourself on a daily basis, and look at all of those different aspects of who we are that's hanging ourselves up in the process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right there, Bill. And it's what I would say to those people that perhaps right this moment at that beginning point where something's happened, they've got chronic pain, they've got a condition that's just been diagnosed, is please don't give up and think this is it, that's the end, that your life is over. It really isn't. It feels like that. It's a different challenge. But you know what? Everybody has challenges in their lives. Everybody. They just take different forms. Yours is just coming in this package as this is. And and if you keep asking questions, if you make sure that you're the center, that you're really important, and even with your, relationship to the medical professionals, go there with understanding of your condition, with what it is. Go there with asking questions. It's a relationship, joint relationship. It's not that they are all knowing. You know your body. You know, if you are able to really listen and really have that stillness, you have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge.
Mhm.
It's not to downplay that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so Stanter, before we started today, you brought up breathworks.
I did,
I'd
yeah.
like to see how we how did that enter into the conversation? What,
Yeah.
where did that come in?
Yeah, so in my 30s, I've had both knees replaced, I've had a hip replacement. I'm back in England. So, I've kind of lived in different parts of the world, and I finally make a decision to come back to England and to settle here. I'm gonna try and now, because I was getting better in my body and, things were beginning to change. I thought, right, okay, I'm going to settle in England. And so being here, I was on the aeroplane and I saw this article, and it was about the expert patient program. So it was this 8-week program for people with long-term health conditions and holistic. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been doing. Like, this
Mhm.
is, this is my 20, 30 years of my life, kind of this program. I need to do that program and I need to teach that program. So I got back and I got in touch with people. It's a voluntary led teacher. So we started teaching it. That led to another job opportunity, which again, I hounded the managers, telling them this was my job. And, it was really important that I get their job. I get that other job. And really in those years, there was also at that point, there was now uh, this beginning to be more talk about mindfulness, just generally. Because as I said, I've been meditating on and off quite a long, long time. And mindfulness was something that kind of kept coming back. And and it was really this kind of discovery of breathworks, because I was looking to think about, well, okay, I want to work, but I don't know quite. I'm not the kind of person. I knew I wasn't going to be able to create my own courses from the knowledge that I had, from the experience that I'd had. So I was looking for what was out there that I could then teach. And I knew about mindfulness. I'd done a little bits of it, but not enough. And I came across Vidya Malabak, who is one of the founders of Breathworks. And she is someone who has her own pain story and her kind of journey to, having partial paraplegia when she was a young woman and chronic pain. And she basically, it was through mindfulness meditation that she began to recover. And again, this journey kind of almost felt like, oh God, that's very familiar, very similar to what my journey had been. So I thought, actually, these are the people that I want to work with. This is really pulling me towards that. And when I'd done one of the courses, a couple of things happened that really showed me like, this is my future. This is what I really want to do. And those two things were my understanding of acceptance and self-compassion. Two things, two pennies dropped. So, acceptance in my head was about giving up, letting go. It felt weak. If acceptance felt a weak thing to
Sure,
do, you
sure.
know. And really, with breathworks, with mindfulness, what I realized was that actually acceptance was a really powerful gift. It was essential, actually. It was an essential part of the healing, because acceptance in its core form is, are you willing to have the experience of what's happening in that moment? Are you willing to, are you willing, are you open to it? And when you bring it down to the point of, in this moment, right now, I have pain in my body. Can I accept that? Well, I can't change it. I can fight against it. I can cry about it. But is that going to take it away? No, still going to have it. Might not like it, but that's the truth of my reality. Just, I'm sure you have certain things going on in your body right now. So, to accept in that moment that that is the truth of this moment.
Mhm.
And just in that accepting of that moment, your the resistance, also the resistance to acceptance, it creates tension, it creates more pain.
Mhm.
So when we're able to let that go and fully embrace the moment, there's a healing that begins to happen in the acceptance part of it. Because then, once I can accept that this is the truth of my reality, then I can relate to my body in a different way. Yeah. Then I can ask different kinds of questions.
Yeah, from my perspective, what I see happening in that moment of the acceptance of being present
Mhm.
with your experience of what's going on, you're actually shifting neurological states. You're
Yes.
moving from like the fight or flight, like resisting that experience, to a parasympathetic state, which is a rested and relaxed state. That it's like in that state, that's the state the body is able to heal.
Yes.
There is neurological shifts that take place. Digestion increases, heart rate decreases, adrenaline production and all that decrease. The breathing will slow down or
Yeah.
relax.
Yeah.
All of that comes online just with that simple mental shift of accepting what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that, oh, well, that's it, except I've got ARIA, I give up, hands up, and I'm done. It's like, no, we're saying in this moment. Each moment is arising and unfolding. Each moment there's something else going on. So it's very much about, okay, in this moment, okay, I've got pain right now, and if I'm resisting, I'm causing tension, as you're saying. My breathing shifted,
Yep.
my solar plexus are tight.
Mhm.
We are in that fight or flight state. It might not be in the way people assume it to be, which is like, oh, my heart's beating and I'm running, or I need to hide, or it's no, these fight or flight states can be really low level, and that's what's happening when we're in resistance, when we're struggling to be with what's actually unfolding for us in that moment, right?
Yep.
And that was huge, huge when that dropped for me, really big, because it's like I'd been resisting, all my life in a way, didn't really want this RA, never. It was always like, I'm going to fight and I'm going to get through, and no matter what, it's very much like that kind of a state. And now with this acceptance came, oh my God, my poor body, you're doing the best that you can. I'm here. And just even doing that level of acceptance coming in, the level of kindness and compassion to my body doing the best that it can, that care with which we can talk to the body. Again, that's changing the biochemistry of the body again, right? So we've got different chemicals now stirring up. So and that's really, really important as well in terms, because when we are in that state, that's where the body can repair. Yeah, that's where the brain is sending signals that actually everything is safe, everything is okay. And we need to be in these states much, much more. And as I was saying to you earlier, that state of compassion, didn't really happen for me until really, honestly, until mindfulness came about in my life. That self compassion, that
Mhm.
self love, that self care, to really kind of think, wow, this body has gone through so much, and yet here I am, I'm still walking. Here I am, I'm still functioning. Here I can still smell and taste and feel, and all these amazing things that were still I was still able to access all of these wonderful things. That it wasn't just this this pain body that I was struggling with, because the other things about my hands were changing, got metal in my body, things that are just some things I just can't do.
Mhm.
But there's a hell of a lot that I still can do, and it's that shift, with mindfulness again, that kind of looking at it from that perspective of the negativity bias, which is that actually because of all the conditioning, because of all the experience that I've had, it's not surprising that that's where my mind's going to go to. Yeah, it's always going to go to the negative, but actually I've got a choice in whether I want to be there. You know, do I want to be blinkered in like, yep, this is pain, this is horrible, I don't like it, I'm not making enough money, I don't have a relationship, and I don't have this, I don't have that? Or can I just lift my head up, let go of the blinkers, and I guess what? The way that sun comes in through the window at 4 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning is just beautiful. The breeze, the way it hits my skin, so it's kind of acknowledging that actually there is beauty around us, even in the midst of chaos, even in the midst of extreme experiences, that there is joy to be had, but we need to find it. We need to be accessing it and really reveling in it so that we have that balance, in our lives.
Mm. Stanter, now, how does it all work with breathworks and you working with clients? Is that something you're only doing in the UK? Um, uh, is that something you work with people online? How does that work? How is that
Yeah.
structured?
So with breathworks, so the initial part was I did some training with them. I've become a teacher, but then now I'm also head of programs for breathworks. But I still do. I run some of the courses. I am involved in kind of curating the program. What we put out into the world. So it's an organization. We're an international organization. We're certainly becoming more global in our reach. Especially, it's interesting with COVID, the one thing it did was it made everything online, right? So we are able to access people in different parts of the world. And our kind of one of the main courses that Vidyamala created, the very first one was Mindfulness for Health. So it's the first pain program, mindfulness pain program that was created almost 20 years ago. So we're really at the forefront in leadership in creating these mindfulness programs to support people with pain. We are a charity, and what that means is that we provide scholarships and bursaries for people, because like myself, for many years I didn't work, so and I understand that many people are not able to afford, it may feel like a luxury to do these courses, but we know this, and that's why we've got the scholarships and the bursaries to really support people. So I do work with people one to one. I run courses, so there's the stress course and the health course. And also the other thing that Breathworks has done in response to the COVID kind of time is that we've created our own community, online community, and that's free. That's absolutely free for people to join. And that might be where, if you're uncertain about mindfulness, they can see that I'm talking about it, but did it really make that much of a difference? And I can promise you, out of all the things that I've done in my life, and I've done a lot of different kinds of treatments and work, for me, mindfulness is the one that is the most profound in many, many ways, because it really helps us to deal with all of those aspects of ourselves, getting really close up to the lived experience of what's happening right now, so that we're not in reaction to life's experiences, but really choosing, what's my response in this? Why do I behave the way do I behave? How can I, when we have pain, what we really want to do is to push it away, to get away from it, because who the hell wants to be living in their pain? But
Right.
actually, mindfulness teaches us to get close, to embrace, to notice, because that is what's going on inside of your body. And when we begin to notice, then you notice that actually it might not this big block thing, that it changes, and we can be responsive to some of those changes. I can make decisions like, okay, I've been sitting down for a while. Oh, okay, there it is. I can feel that prickling energy beginning to happen in my shoulders. So I might just do a few shoulder rolls, or I might just stand up, have a little bit of a stretch. I know for me, because I do work at my desk quite a bit, I need to have a walk every day. I need to do my Pilates every day, every other day. So it's about being able to put in all of these other aspects to help deal with the condition that you're in, so that, as we were talking about earlier, this sense of well-being, that it is no longer about, am I cured, and therefore that's the bar that I'm holding myself up from, then having this sense of failure because I'm not curing myself. But now there's this other place that says, actually, I am really healthy at the age of almost 55. I would say I'm probably the healthiest that I've ever been in my life,
That's
you know,
fantastic. That's
than ever.
fantastic.
Hmm.
That's so exciting. Stanter, I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story. It's very inspiring, especially for anybody that's suffering with chronic pain.
Yeah.
Um, your journey has been absolutely amazing. Like from the age of 15 to now, that's just incredible.
Thank you.
So we'll have all of the ways to contact you down below in the description of the video, as well as
Yeah.
on the Comella Foundation website as well.
Yeah.
Is there any last bit you'd like to tie up today's call with before we end?
I think if you're someone, beginning in that journey with chronic pain or ill health in some way, the version you hoped you'd be may not be manifesting, but the version you're meant to be will, you
That's a
know?
good one. Yes.
And that version
Mm.
will depend on what you're willing to do right now. How much are you willing to partake in that possibility rather than the one that you wanted to be?
Right.
Because there is so much beauty and wonder that can still happen, even with a body that doesn't work, everything looking as if it's never going to happen for you. It just may not happen the way you think it's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but don't give up. And
Yeah.
really, I think if you're going to try anything, really do a mindfulness course because that can be the first step in that healing.
Awesome. That's so inspiring.
Thank you.
Stanter, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Appreciate you very much. You sharing your knowledge and expertise and wisdom. Yeah, it was really special today. Really
Thank
special
you.
for me to be able to interview you.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate it. And I think you've got all the links and things for breathworks and my own personal stuff. So that'd be really great. So if anybody wants to reach out, I live in the UK, but as I said, we do have international clients and people who are interested in breathworks. Please reach out. Honestly, it's just even having a conversation sometimes with someone, when you're going through that can give you hope and can give you one possible thing that you can make a start on. And that can go into the next step and the next step. And before you know it, your life unfolds in a really interesting way.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, Stancher, once again, thank you so much. This
Thank
is
you.
Bill Paravano, the knee pain guru, going to sign off on behalf of the Pain Education Podcast brought to you by the Comella Foundation. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Thank you for tuning into this week's segment of the Pain Education Corner. Join us next week for another conversation on natural healing methods to eliminate pain. To learn more about the work we do at the Comella Foundation, please visit our website at the Comella, Comella Foundation.org.